The conflict between the United States and the Islamic Republic has escalated sharply, with American forces launching their largest strikes in days after the regime attacked another commercial ship in the Strait of Hormuz. The exchange has spread across the Arab states in the Persian Gulf, raising fears of a wider regional war. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
The United States has launched a massive new wave of strikes against Iran after the Islamic Revolutionary Guard attacked a second commercial vessel in the Strait of Hormuz and claimed the strategic waterway remains closed. U.S. Central Command said American forces struck approximately 140 Iranian military targets using fighter aircraft, drones, and naval vessels. The targets included missile and drone sites, naval assets, ammunition depots, communications networks, and coastal surveillance positions aimed at degrading Iran's ability to threaten shipping in the Gulf. The strikes followed an IRGC attack on the Cyprus-flagged container ship GFS Galaxy, which suffered major damage after being hit in the Strait of Hormuz. The crew abandoned ship, and one crew member was reported missing. Iran responded by claiming it targeted the U.S. Al Udeid air base in Qatar with ballistic missiles, while also striking U.S.-linked military facilities in Jordan and Kuwait. Air defenses were activated across the Gulf, including in Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Iran had made a poor decision and vowed the United States would continue to degrade Tehran's military capabilities and protect freedom of navigation. Despite continued diplomatic contacts through Oman, the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for global energy supplies, has once again become the focal point of the rapidly escalating confrontation that threatens to draw the entire region deeper into conflict. The developments come as Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu continue close coordination amid the escalating confrontation with Iran. According to the Prime Minister's office, the two leaders spoke again this week, with Trump updating Netanyahu on U.S. military operations in the Gulf.
New details are now emerging about the growing security threats facing U.S. President Donald Trump. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee has confirmed that Israel shared intelligence with Washington about a specific Iranian assassination plot, as the White House also deals with a foiled domestic terror plot targeting both Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. ILTV's Devil Klein joins us here in the studio with more. Devil, what can you tell us about this latest plot?
Absolutely. So a new report by the Wall Street Journal did confirm that the plane that Trump originally arrived in Turkey for the famous 2026 NATO summit, as we can all remember, that same plane was avoided. It was not used on his trip back, Trump landing on a different Air Force One, of course, the famous plane gifted by the Qataris to President Trump. Now, this was a report published by the Wall Street Journal and based off of sources from American officials confirming this to be true. Now, like you rightfully mentioned, Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador, just recently teased that Israeli intelligence helped foil an assassination plot. He, of course, was very, extensive with the severity of the plot. It was very specific, very targeted to kill President Trump. And so now we're connecting the dots with this Wall Street Journal and saying, well, this is probably that same assassination plot, which is probably why Donald Trump used that separate plane to come back to the United States after the NATO summit. Now, Emily, this wouldn't be the first time, as you know, that an assassination attempt on the American president was foiled. There were also many attempts that were not preemptively foiled, but they were foiled in real time and action. This is not the first time, and it might not be the last. And this is also coming during a very interesting time where the Islamic regime in Iran is intensifying their rhetoric against President Trump. We've obviously seen the abhorrent images from the funeral processions of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of the "we're going to kill Trump and we're targeting them." But a new post, a propaganda post of a quote-unquote hit list that was published by a news source that's close to the Tehran municipality, which shows a list of both Israeli and American, but also even European officials, AI images of them in orange jumpsuits with targets on their heads. Now, there is a parallel that you can draw here between the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in the start of this war. Mujtaba Khamenei, his predecessor, and his son now using very strong language to say that the revenge will be taken for the death of his father. So definitely not the first time that this is happening, but you can see the correlation, and Iran probably definitely very interested in getting, a tit for tat, knocking down President Trump. But I think they're going to have to try a little bit harder than that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the thorough update. Certainly, this is something that's been very much on their agenda for years, even prior to this latest operation. So we'll continue to update you on that. But thankfully, this one was foiled. Thank you, Devo. As the military conflict with the Islamic Republic escalates and threats against President Trump mount, we turn now to Colonel Rich Utzin, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, for his analysis. Thank you so much for joining us today. Pleasure to have you on the broadcast. Now, the U.S. has now launched its largest wave of strikes on the Islamic Republic in days after the Strait of Hormuz was again attacked. How do you assess this level of escalation, and what is the U.S. strategy now?
Oh, well, it's good to be with you. I still see this as a fairly limited escalation, even though there's been 3 waves of strikes, 300 targets hit yesterday, 140, as you said, the biggest wave of the week. But the targeting matters here, and the targeting so far is still exclusively military sites, so air defense sites, fuel depots for the Iranian military, naval launch sites, all that sort of thing. So I think it's hard to characterize this as a full-scale escalation. They're not going after many economic targets from the start. President Trump has wanted to do limited damage to the Iranian economy because at the end he wants to sort of incentivize them to make a deal and then to reintegrate with the regional and global economies. Can't do that if you blow their economy up. At the same time, though, that limits the amount of pain that the Iranians are actually feeling. So I think this is sort of, to use a phrase I learned when I was serving in Israel, part of the rules of the game, right? So Iran understands it can do a certain amount of strikes. It's going to absorb a certain amount of damage in return. Both sides will play this game until one decides they've had enough punishment. And that could be political punishment for President Trump heading into the November midterms, or it could be economic and infrastructure damage on the side of the Iranians.
Now, with the Islamic Republic claiming that they carried out strikes on U.S.-linked facilities in Qatar, Jordan, and Kuwait all this week, as well as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz again, how concerned should we be about this conflict spreading across the region even wider?
Well, I don't think it's a spread in geographical terms we should worry about. It's a spread in terms of time, in chronological terms, because honestly, who have the Iranians not hit so far during the course of the last 4 months or 5 months of fighting? They've hit Saudi, they've attacked even into Turkey, Iraq, obviously, and sites throughout the region. They tried to hit Israel without much success. But the bottom line is they've shown that they can take a punch. And that's really the problem from the perspective of the U.S. and I think Israel as well. The idea that we're now in a persistent conflict and that Iran is not going to be knuckled under. And now we've reached the situation where Iran has essentially their own, not great capabilities, but latitude to conduct strikes against the Gulf neighbors and against the U.S. and Israel. So they've proven that they can do that at a low, albeit not very effective level. But the fact that we can't actually compel them, the failure of compellence, is what's the real story here. So I don't worry about this somehow. There's not going to be a ground invasion of Iran or Iran doing a ground invasion outward. They don't have the capacity to launch major new waves of attacks. But the fact that they can now, for the foreseeable future, every day launch some drones, some missiles, and really create instability in the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf, I think that's the risk, because that's a long-term economic risk to the health and stability of the region.
Not just the region, also the world, I would say, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. But I do want to move on to another important topic that came up this week. Ambassador Huckabee has now confirmed that Israel shared intelligence with Washington about a specific plot, Iranian plot to assassinate President Trump, yet another one. What does this level of threat, this obsession with the assassination of the U.S. president, tell us about the intentions and the thinking of the Islamic Republic right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think it's very predictable that when you decapitate a regime in the way that the U.S. and Israel did by taking out Khamenei, and the other top kind of echelon or 2 echelons of senior leadership, they would love to do the same. And during the recent burial process, the week-long burial process for Ayatollah Khamenei, they had signs that said, "We will kill Trump." So obviously the intelligence coordination and cooperation between the U.S. and Israel is fantastic. And connecting the dots, if you will, between the stated desire to kill Trump and some actual attempts to do it is very important. And I think that led to some modifications of travel plans and things like that. I think as long as we're more or less in a state of war with the Iranians, of course they're going to try to take out command and control targets, including Trump. But look, President Trump's kind of used to it. He's had 3 attempts on his life domestically as well. So, this was handled professionally, a good example of coordination. It's not I think, shocking in the sense that Iran is a terrorist regime, and we can expect them to continue to try to assassinate people in the United States, just like they've done in the region for the last 40 years.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for your insights. We're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
The prophet spoke of a land rebuilt. Today, that miracle is a global economic powerhouse. For generations, we've given our hearts to Israel. We can now join its ascent. Wise Money Israel helps you share in Israel's rising prosperity. Working with SEC and Israel-licensed experts, you'll access stocks and bonds that power the nation's defense, technology, record-breaking growth. Not just a portfolio, but a powerful commitment to the enduring strength of the Jewish state. Investing in Israel is investing in the future. Visit wisemoneyisrael.com/ILTV.
Well, Israel is mourning the loss of one of the men considered to be one of Israel's best friends in Washington. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, a leading champion of the U.S.-Israel alliance for more than 2 decades, has passed away at the age of 71 following what his office described as a brief and sudden illness. ILTV's Devil Klein reports.
U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, considered by many to have been Israel's strongest and most consistent supporter in the United States Congress, has died at the age of 71. Graham's office said the Republican senator passed away following a brief and sudden illness. Throughout his career, Graham was a leading advocate for the U.S.-Israel alliance, making frequent visits to Israel and standing firmly beside the country during its most difficult moments.
He was such an American patriot. He was unabashedly for America, and he was unabashedly against the enemies of America. And he spoke what he thought. You know, he had a way with him. He had this charming Southern drawl, and you knew something was coming when he would say, well, I'm just a poor old Southern boy. And then you know he's coming in with the most penetrating insight that few people can deny and that everybody recognizes is the truth. He had a way with him. He was a wonderful, wonderful friend, a great American patriot, and a great champion of the Israel-American alliance. And I'll miss him personally a lot, a lot. I really, really thought the world of him. And I think the world has lost a great human being. America has lost a great senator, and we have lost a great friend.
Following the October 7th Hamas massacre, he returned to Israel repeatedly, meeting with Israeli leaders, visiting communities devastated by the attacks, and calling for unwavering American support for Israel's war against Hamas. He was also a vocal supporter of tough action against Iran and Hezbollah, arguing that Tehran's proxies had to be defeated to ensure Israel's long-term security. President Isaac Herzog said he was shocked and heartbroken, calling Graham a great American patriot, a great friend of Israel, and my dear friend. Herzog described him as, quote, a beacon of moral clarity and a true leader of the U.S.-Israel partnership, saying Israel would never forget how he stood by the Jewish state in its darkest hours. Defense Minister Israel Katz said Graham stood with Israel in its most difficult moments, worked tirelessly to strengthen the strategic alliance between Jerusalem and Washington, and was an unwavering voice in defense of Israel's right to protect its citizens. For many in Israel, Lindsey Graham will be remembered as more than a politician. He was a steadfast friend, a fierce advocate for Israel's security, and a powerful voice who never wavered in his support of the Jewish state. His legacy will endure in the enduring bond between Israel and the United States.
Well, as Israel is mourning the loss of Senator Lindsey Graham, long considered one of the Jewish state's closest friends in Washington, we're joined now by attorney Mark Zell, the chairman of Republicans Overseas Israel, to discuss his legacy. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. It's great to have you. Senator Graham was often called Israel's best friend in Congress. How would you describe the impact that he had on the U.S.-Israel relationship over his more than 2 decades in the Senate?
Yeah, just 2 decades in the Senate, Emily. By the way, thank you for having me on today. And he was another 8 years, almost a decade in the House of Representatives. And during that period of time, he developed and evolved into being really the leading Republican advocate for Israel and the American-Israeli strategic relationship. His death will certainly leave a great hole in the wall of support that Israel enjoys and the American-Israel relationship enjoys among legislatures in Washington. But I'd also want to say, I mean, with all the great respect that I have for Lindsey Graham, who is a man of small stature but a giant in the world of statesmanship, courage, and ideological clarity and common sense in the foreign policy arena, which is very rare. The Republican Party is filled with very, very powerful, competent spokesmen who understand the importance of the Israeli-American relationship on all levels. Certainly on the military and strategic and defense level, but also in terms of our shared values. There's no other country in the Middle East, and perhaps very few on the planet, who can make the claim that Israel can, that it has really a common basis, a common foundation with the United States and the American people when it comes to our basic values of freedom and liberty, of faith and respect for the individual in society, as opposed to the collectivist, socialist trends that have now overtaken the Democratic Party and are now sweeping across America.
Well, Lindsey Graham did return to Israel repeatedly after October 7th to meet with leaders and to visit some of these devastated communities. What do you think drove his level of personal commitment to the state of Israel?
Well, first of all, as I indicated, he grew up in a Southern Baptist home in central South Carolina. He came really from the most meager of origins, and pulled himself up, the first member of his family, I think, to go to college. And look what he's done with his life. But his whole life as a military officer, as a congressman, as a senator, was based on authenticity and a clear reading of reality. And what he has seen when it comes to the foreign policy of the United States in the Middle East and other parts of the world, like the Ukraine and in Eastern Europe, Lindsey Graham saw the world through a very clear and transparent set of parameters. He was very, very commonsensical about his foreign policy. He wasn't just some kind of ideologue that was mouthing aphorisms and popular sayings. He understood the role that the United States plays in the world at large and must play if not only if the rest of the world is to maintain its stability and prosperity, but the American people as well. So that's what I think his views came from, really a very homespun, realistic perception of the way things work both at home and abroad.
All right, well, we'll be watching that closely, certainly. Thank you so much for joining us today to speak a little bit about the legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham. Mark Zell.
We wish him and his family, of course, very well, his sister and nieces and so on. And we wish all of you and your viewers good tidings and a good week ahead.
Thank you. After several rounds of direct Israeli-Lebanese talks in Washington, the next round of U.S.-mediated negotiations will take place in Rome later this week. The talks follow last month's U.S.-brokered framework agreement calling for a phased IDF withdrawal from parts of southern Lebanon, with the Lebanese army assuming control of designated areas and responsibility for disarming Hezbollah under international oversight. At the same time, the U.S. military delegation is in Beirut finalizing arrangements for the first pilot withdrawal zone as the implementation of the agreement moves forward. Meanwhile, the IDF says it continues to strike Hezbollah targets inside the security zone. Over the weekend, Israeli troops identified Hezbollah operatives transporting anti-tank missiles into a building in southern Lebanon. After additional weapons were moved inside, the Israeli Air Force carried out a precision strike. The IDF said secondary explosions confirmed the building was being used as a weapons cache. In a separate operation, the military said it eliminated a Hezbollah operative near the entrance to an underground tunnel complex in the Ali Tahrir Ridge, while a second suspect was killed in an airstrike after being identified as an immediate threat to Israeli forces. The IDF says it will continue operations to destroy Hezbollah's military infrastructure and to prevent the terror group from re-establishing its presence along Israel's northern border. The IDF says it is also continuing its campaign to eliminate senior terror operatives in Gaza, as Palestinian sources reported fatalities in a series of Israeli airstrikes across the Strip. The military confirmed several high-value eliminations, including Rashid al-Qadi, a senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander responsible for weapons production, and Hamas sniper Abdullah al-Souti, who the IDF said posed a direct threat to Israeli troops. The IDF and Shin Bet also announced the elimination of Wahid Abu Salam, a company commander in the Popular Resistance Committees who took part in the October 7th massacre, including the abduction and detention of Israeli hostages.
In Israel, everything can change in an instant. That's why Hadassah hospitals don't wait for a crisis to prepare. In times of trouble, our hospitals react quickly, rushing units underground, maternity wards, cancer units, ICUs, ensuring our life-changing care continues. Soldiers are saved, civilians healed. But more underground facilities are urgently needed. Advanced operating rooms, fortified recovery spaces, and additional beds. The people of Israel always need to be ready for whatever comes next. Please visit Hadassah.org and give today, because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. Hadassah, life-changing.
Israel's under-20 women's national basketball team has reached the FIBA U20 Women's Eurobasket final for the first time in the nation's history, capping a breakthrough tournament in Lithuania. The blue and white defeated tournament favorite Belgium 78-69 in the semifinals, extending its first ever U20 Women's European Championship, a historic opportunity that reflects the rapid rise of women's basketball in Israel and a bright future for the next generation of Israeli female hoopsters. Good luck to the blue and white. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 32 degrees or 89 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's it for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's ILTV_Israel on all platforms. You can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.